This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, Detroit sports fans? Welcome to the Fan Report, a show made by fans for fans, powered by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I'm Nick, and joining us today, Xander's going to give us this week's topics.
Well, Troy Weaver had a busy week this week. If anyone was able to keep track of the moves by heart, applause. And Detroit Lions, I just don't really want to talk about them, but I guess we have to. But yeah, it's a Fan Report.
Technically speaking, we do have to talk about them.
Yeah.
Do I want to? No.
They don't deserve our attention.
It, honest to God, was one of the most boring games I have ever watched in my life.
Which, I'll be honest, I was expecting that going in, and it was more boring than I expected.
I kind of was too, but like you mentioned, it was even worse than I expected. Like, this was terrible. This was straight up the worst display of football I've seen all year. The worst display of football. I will say this. If there's one positive to take out of it, it's given me a reason to drink on a Sunday. So there we have it.
You don't drink during every Lions game?
I mean, I do, but it's given me a reason to drink after a Lions game on Sunday. So, cheers to everybody out there who had to endure that torture. It was an absolutely brutal game. The first time the Lions have been shut out since, I want to say, November of 2009.
It's only the second shutout in the NFL this season.
Yes. They yet again, which, can you name the first one?
Oh, that's a good question.
Miami Dolphins shut out the New York Jets. That was the other one.
Did. Yes, they did.
I believe that game was 24-0. They made yet again yet another backup quarterback who is a no-name look honestly pretty damn good at times today. Did he have a couple of mistakes in the end zone? Yes. But dude was in the XFL last year, not even in the NFL. So the fact that they allowed him to throw a touchdown says something. I mean, there really isn't any positives to take out of this game.
That was going to be my first question. Do you have a single positive today?
No, not a single one. Not a single positive to take out of this game. Nobody looked good. Prater was terrible yet again. The offensive line, this is probably the worst game they've played all season.
You managed 40 yards rushing against one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL.
Yeah. I
don't care that you didn't have DeAndre Swift. You should be able to get more than 40 yards rushing on 17 carries against this team.
It's very obvious who the playmakers on this team are. And both of them, at least on the offense side of the ball, and both of them were missing this week in Kenny Galladay and DeAndre Swift. And that just gives even more reason to re-sign Kenny Galladay, because without him and without DeAndre Swift, the offense is straight up inept. Yeah. Like they are incapable of performing at all at an NFL level.
The offensive line was straight up garbage. Stafford got sacked 5 times today.
And was constantly pressured throughout the game as well. Like
a lot of dumb drops, which is kind of at the start of the season for the Lions.
Even TJ Hawkinson had one today. It was...
What was worse, TJ Hawkinson's drop or AP's drop on that screen pass? That just would literally just... He had no one around him, just hit him right in the hands. He just goes, whoops.
I think Hawkinson's drop had a little bit more impact because that was a big
third down. They had more impact. It was on a third down.
But... I think AP's drop was a little bit worse, and there's a reason why we don't throw the football to Adrian Peterson, and that was it right there.
You had botched snaps. Yeah,
you straight up don't need Adrian Peterson on this roster anymore. I don't know why he's still here. I get he's your short yardage guy, but from what I've seen, the Lions just aren't in short yardage situations very often anyways. So
then again, Carry-On didn't look much better. So
no, he didn't. He really didn't. DeAndre Swift needs to be your guy. He is your guy, and he needs to be your guy for the future. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
I still don't know why it took till week 10.
Neither does Adrian Peterson. Even he said he doesn't know why it took him that long. And that's kind of sad. Yeah. There really isn't any positives to take out of this game. I have a long list. Like, I got to roll out the scroll for my list of negatives for this game.
Yeah,
I got to scroll as long as Santa Claus's list for the.
Jeff Okudah was getting cooked. Desmond Trufant was getting cooked.
Like, this man can't cover anybody. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you're the number 3 overall pick. You're supposed to be this hot, top-notch cornerback, and you come into the league, you get torched by just about anybody you face. DJ Moore made you look like shit today.
It's concerning.
It seriously is. Like, I'm not, like, don't get me wrong. I'm not giving up on Jeff Okudah. I still see some positives in his game, and I've seen some so far this year that's like, okay, he's a rookie. Maybe he'll progress. But, like, I don't see an ability to cover any receiver in this league, let alone ones.
Yeah.
Let alone the top guy on the other team. I don't see an ability to cover any receiver. Valdez Scantling torched him. DJ Moore torched him.
Our Warrior is looking like your best corner right now.
why Desmond Trufant's even still in it playing as many play downs as he is compared to Arouarier is beyond me, because Arouarier straight up is your best corner right now.
Like, I was hoping we'd have like some minor level of excitement going into Thursday. Like, you're at 500. Let's have a just token above 500 point of the season going into Texans, but no, it's not.
Like, you had a chance if you were 500 going into that game on Thursday. Mm-hmm. You had, 6 games remaining at that point? You win 3 of them. You may sniff that second wild card spot just because of the fact that the NFC East is as bad. And it's against mostly against division opponents. Like, you have a shot at that point. But going in at 4-6, you have to essentially go.
Considering the schedule you close out your season with, you're done.
Yeah, you essentially have to go 5-1 the rest of the way against the toughest part of your schedule all season long.
Especially when you're talking about a team that just barely scraped by the Washington Redskins, and then just got
football team.
Sorry, god damn.
It's gonna take years to get. Honestly, they just need to actually get a name so that we can start calling them that.
Did you hear, by the way, that the owner said that Washington football team is absolutely in play as their permanent team name?
Is he trolling? I love reading the articles. I just love reading the articles that say the football team went up against.
But yeah, so you barely scraped by against the Washington football team, and then you just got shut out by a already bad Panthers team that doesn't have their starting quarterback and obviously doesn't have Christian McCaffrey. Even if you were to win against the Texans and you were to pull it off against Chicago and you're back to 500, I can't honestly sit here and say that, oh, you have a shot against the good teams at the end of your schedule. No, you don't have a shot. This team is terrible.
You honestly will. You have a good shot against the Texans this week, who pulled off an upset up against the Patriots this week, who also look pretty bad. In all honesty,
I thought we had a good shot this week, and look what happened.
And honestly, the Bears' offense is just bad enough, and I mean putrid enough to honestly, you may actually be in that game against Chicago in the first week of December.
Yeah, PJ Walker's probably better than any of their quarterbacks.
He might just be. He might just be.
I feel so bad for Allen Robinson.
I mean,
too. The guy gets open so much and gets overthrown every time. I
watched a video of Allen Robinson torching every DB he's faced this year. And it was a montage of passes of times he's torched his DB and still been overthrown. It was just a montage of overthrown passes deep. And honestly, I do feel bad for Allen Robinson because he's a legit great receiver in this league. If he had anybody, Bueller, in that throwing in the football, he might end up breaking records.
Yeah. But that's a solace I could take. At least we don't have Chicago's QB situation, but I feel like...
Right. I mean, ours ain't looking too great right now. Stafford has... I
feel like it's only a matter of time before Stafford wants out at this point.
Wants out, or we shoot him out of a cannon at this point. Dude's been terrible this year. Like, he's straight up garbage, and then you got his wife who can't keep her mouth shut.
Oh yeah,
like don't get me wrong. Let people outside the game talk as much as they want, but like, I think Matthew Stafford needs to just sit his wonderful, beautiful wife down, and she's, the Staffords are great people. They do a lot in the community on both sides of the political spectrum. They're great for the community and they're good people, but she really needs to stop talking about things that she's just not involved in. And with her calling out this dictatorship of a state and how sick of it she is living here, and
not to harp on this topic, but like it's the thing, like that being the wife of a premier NFL quarterback, that there's a lot of eyes on your social media too, that you are also in the public eye, and you need to act accordingly. Like.
And yet she's going out on Instagram or wherever she did it and posting videos of her ranting about a dictatorship in the state of Michigan. And
not the first time.
No, in all honesty, it shows how ignorant she is. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how she can't have at least a little bit more respect for healthcare employees, like especially nursing staffs and and providers and stuff, considering she had brain tumor. She was a brain cancer survivor. And for her to be this short-sighted and ignorant on this situation and basically just ignore the fact that there's a pandemic going on and, we live in a dictatorship. I understand she apologized, and I understand they do a lot for the community, but I don't understand what positive could come out of that for her. But anyways, that's a moot point, beside the point, whatever. Back to football.
I have one big takeaway from this game. Like this is the one big storyline that I pulled out of this. And,
the Lions are just no good.
Well, yeah, there's that. But I know a lot of people, there's a lot of Lions Kool-Aid drinkers that are going to say that, yeah, we don't have maybe our two biggest playmakers at this point in Golladay and DeAndre Swift. But I don't really want to hear that because Carolina didn't have two of their biggest playmakers in Bridgewater and CMC. I really do think the only way you get shut out against a team like Carolina Panthers, this falls squarely on coaching. There is no other way around this, in my opinion. As much as the players on the field look terrible, I think Matt Patricia looked worse today. I want to know if you're in agreement with me on that.
Oh, 100% in agreement. And I'm actually going to take it a step further. The fact that we are without our two top playmakers on offense and couldn't muster up a single point goes to show that we have no other playmakers on this offense. And that goes to show how awful of a job Bob Quinn has done as the GM of this football team. We have literally two playmakers on the offensive side of the football on this football team. That is not sustainable. That is not a road to success in this league in any way. Look at the Panthers. They're a 3-7 football team without two of their top playmakers, including the field general and Teddy Bridgewater, and arguably the number one running back in football in Christian McCaffrey. They're without the top two guys right there. But yet, look how many other playmakers they have on that football team. Mike Davis is a playmaker. Robbie Anderson's a playmaker. DJ Moore's a playmaker. Curtis Samuel's a playmaker. Where are the playmakers on this football team? And that's a 3-7, now 4-7 football team. That's not it's not even a good team we're talking about here. And you couldn't muster up a single point because you don't have playmakers on the offensive side of the ball outside of Kenny Golladay and DeAndre Swift. TJ Hawkinson's one, fine, sure, he can be a guy, but you got to have more than one. You got to have more than one when your top two go down. It's next man up in this league.
And this is where my thought process falls here is when you come down to a situation like this where now you're starting to rely on your depth and what kind of players you have, I do think a lot of this falls on coaching and being able to scheme for what you have on the field. I'm not entirely convinced that if you put Quintez Cephas on a team like the Packers, let's say, that Quintez Cephas wouldn't do well. Or if you put him, if you replace Quintez, if you put him on the Carolina Panthers right now, I mean, you probably get overshadowed by DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. But I'm saying, like, if you put him on a team with a different coaching staff and he had the opportunity that he has in Detroit here with no Kenny Golladay, he's getting a lot of reps. I'm not convinced that a guy like Quintez Cephas wouldn't become a playmaker.
At least a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that a guy because we know Marvin Hall has an ability to get open. We've seen him get open deep a lot. I'm not convinced that Marvin Hall, if you scheme for him properly, couldn't become a playmaker. I'm not saying that we have great playmakers. I'm not saying we have a great roster. We actually have a terrible roster. I'm just saying I feel like if you had coaching that was worth a damn, you could at least make something out of what you have out there.
I think coaching is a major problem with this team. I completely agree. I don't think they know how to scheme a game properly at all, especially on the offensive side of the football. I think they're lost there. And defensively, frankly, for that matter. I mean, we went up against a guy who played in the XFL last year, and he looked like an actually competent NFL quarterback against your defense and your secondary that you've invested so much into. You've invested a number 3 overall pick in Jeff Okudah. You invested how much money in Desmond Trufant and Justin Coleman? You invested another draft pick in Amani Aruarie. You've invested so much in that secondary, just at the cornerback position, not to mention the safety position. And an XFL quarterback threw for nearly 300 yards on you today, if not over 300 yards today. 258 and a touchdown.
And do you want to explain to me why you're going for it on 4th and 20 when you're in field goal range down 17?
I don't know. I don't know. It looked like they had packed it up at that point.
Coaching.
It looked like they had packed it up at that point. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. But in all honesty, going back to the GM of this organization and Bob Quinn, look, you want to talk about investing a bunch of assets into a position group. Look at the offensive line. Between TJ Lang, Rick Wagner, now those guys are no longer here. Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker, Halapu, I'm not even going to say it, Big Daddy V, Vitae.
Big Daddy V.
The amount of money and draft capital you have invested into that offensive line and to look as bad as they did today and this year, for the most part, It's just a referendum on what the group that is putting this roster together, and especially on Bob Quinn. That tells you he has no idea how to put together a roster in the NFL. No idea. If I were Sheila Ford Hamp, I would shoot them both out of a cannon. I wouldn't even allow them to come back to Detroit. Sorry, guys, we're on a lockdown here, and you're not allowed back in.
You go spend Thanksgiving with your families. Yeah, get out of here, you kids.
Yeah, basically.
I don't know what else there is to talk about with this team right now. Like,
zero positives from today's game.
It feels like the same story every week. I don't know what else to
at this point. It really
hit on with this.
It really does, because there's zero reason to keep Bob Quinn and Patricia at this point. Zero reason, none. You've gotten 4 wins this year. One was a lucky win against the Washington football team that, frankly, you almost blew. One was a win that you shouldn't have gotten against Atlanta if Todd Gurley had stayed out of the end zone. And one was a win against Arizona that I still don't understand how you won that game, other than Kyler Murray shot himself in the foot in that game.
It's still such an anomaly. It's so weird.
It doesn't make sense. It's Kyler Murray played a bad football game.
Yeah.
That's what it is. This Lions team has not looked good at all this year, frankly, and they don't look good right now, and this is probably the lowest point as a Lions fan that I've been in a long time, because we're not only below mediocre in terms of talent and potential, but from what I can see is there's no path to move up until I see Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia shot out of a cannon and sent packing with their bags. I don't see a way up for this team.
All right, let's go on to a team that we could be optimistic about.
Well, hold on. Before you get into that, I technically speaking, we do have to talk about next week. Do you have any hope against the Houston Texans? I know how bad of a football team they are.
I would have been calling this a win just yesterday. Now, assuming I'm assuming we get DeAndre Swift back. I mean, I'm hoping he makes it back from the concussion protocol in time. I don't think Kenny Galladay was that close to returning this week, even though a lot of people thought he was going to be. I don't really see Kenny Galladay coming back for next week. If we get DeAndre Swift back and can run the offense through him, we have a shot. But if not, and the way this team looked without him, no. So I'm going to go with no. I'm going to go with I think they lose on Thanksgiving.
I don't think our defense will be able to stop Houston from scoring in this game.
Oh yeah, I don't that too. I don't trust them to do
really
anything
don't.
with Deshaun Watson.
Like, David Johnson's going to torch us. Deshaun Watson's going to torch us both through the air and the ground. Will Fuller's probably going to put up 3 touchdowns. Brandon Cook's going to go for 140 yards. I don't see how the Lions stop Houston from scoring, and I don't think our offense is good enough to be able to score enough to keep up. Not after what I saw today. So, another loss moving forward. Nice, good old Lions fan tradition of watching them lose on Thanksgiving Day. Only this time it's from the comfort of my own home, and it's usually not.
Oh, man. All right, let's get on to some basketball talk. So we did have the NBA draft this past week. The Pistons were very active in this draft. They came in just having
understatement of the century.
They came in just having the 7th overall pick, and that's it. They left with 3 first-round picks and an early second-round pick as well.
They did.
They grabbed Killian Hayes, number 7 overall.
Which you and I both have, That's a guy we've targeted pretty much from the beginning of draft talk. He's the point guard of the future in our eyes for the Pistons, so we obviously give that pick an A+. That was the guy we wanted. Yeah. I will actually knock it down to a flat A. My one reason being, Obi Toppin was available. I think that dude's something special.
Yeah, you love you some Obi Toppin.
I think that dude is special, and I'll straight up admit it. If I am wrong, I will straight up admit it. Yeah. But I think that dude is something special, and you could have had a special talent with Obi Toppin.
I agree in the fact that he could become a problem on offense in this league. I just what really scares me is he's straight up a black hole on defense. Like,
I mean, so was James Harden.
Like, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So for him to pan out as a top 10 pick, you're hoping that his offense pans out to the level of those kinds of guys.
I will say this, though. Obi Toppin is a guy who has the intangibles and the capability to play defense and learn to play defense. So I think at least he can become a competent defender in this league. Yeah. I do think that that's something he can do. I think he can become a competent defender in this league. Yeah. And if happens...
I'm still a believer that a lot of defense is effort. It's a lot of what defense is. Obviously, you have to have a lot of intangibles in terms of size and length and quickness.
And he has that.
Measurables, but...
And he has that. So, and that's why I think if he in the right situation, now granted, I don't think New York is the right situation, but given the right situation, the right coaching, I think he could become a competent defender. And if his offensive game flourishes the way I expect it to, I straight up think this dude will be a special player someday.
But back to Killian Hayes, I do love the pick, and I do think that, I'm not saying it's going to happen, I do think there's a chance that Killian Hayes starts in his first season, if not on day one. I kind of want him to start, but I can obviously see them bring him behind Derrick Rose for a little bit. But the reason I say that is because he can immediately be effective on the defensive end at the very least, coming in at point guard. And we know that he has some of the best passing vision, some of the best pick and roll execution in this draft too. And the Pistons love to run the pick and roll. So,
do you know how fun it would have been to see Christian Wood and Killian Hayes run the pick and roll together?
Yeah, that would have been fun. That would have been fun.
But honestly, you gave me some very scary and not fun flashbacks of Bruce Brown right there, being the guy that can immediately impact on defense and let his offensive game.
Well, we know he has a better offensive game than Bruce Brown.
I mean, there are some negatives with Killian Hayes' offensive game. He's not a great 3-point shooter. I believe he shot 29% from outside this past year over in Europe. Him being a French player coming from Europe, there are a lot of unknowns in his game. And I mean, we've talked about this pretty extensively with Killian Hayes, or with each other and on this podcast when it comes to Killian Hayes, because he has been one of our top targets. I think Killian Hayes is a guy that can produce pretty much right away. And I agree with you. There is a very good chance that he is handed the keys to this backcourt by Dwayne Casey and Troy Weaver to say, here, go get it, develop your game, become the point guard of the future of this franchise. So we are going to start building around you. I think that's entirely possible. I can't fault the pick in any way. I think he's a guy that will be a cornerstone of this franchise for a while, and I can only hope that's the case. But from what I know about him and what I've heard and what I expect, I think that's something that we can be comfortable doing and comfortable building around and making him a focal point of this offense until we continue to add talent to this organization over the next coming years. So.
But he's a really good building block. That's why I get the pick in A as well. So
now let me ask you this: with the way that Troy Weaver has straight up gutted this roster, like I think we are returning about 4 players to this year's upcoming team compared to last year. Is this Troy Weaver basically intentionally, unintentionally bottoming out to try to grab a top 3 pick in next year's draft?
That's what I thought initially, and we'll get to these. But some of the moves I saw him make in free agency tells me he's not trying to bottom out, but I do think he's immediately trying to make his own imprint on this roster.
And
I also think it speaks to how bad our roster was. That he's like, yeah, just these guys all suck. Just get them out of here.
Just burn it all down and let's start new. You know what? Just tear down the arena. We're gonna start completely fresh.
But moving on, number 16th overall, we made a trade back into the first round with Houston. Got the number 16th overall pick. Drafted Isaiah Stewart, center out of Washington. He's a small ball. He's 6'9", so he's a little bit of a smaller center. I texted you immediately after this pick, and I was like, I hate it.
I don't like the pick. I'll be straight up honest with you. I still don't like the pick.
So he's grown on me slightly the more I've read up on him, but at the same time, I still don't like it because he's not the type. He's the type of player the NBA has been going away from. He's a vintage big. He can't really score outside the low post. He's not a good passer. He can't step out to the perimeter to defend. He's firmly a low post guy, really good defender down low, really high effort guy, can score down low. Honestly, he reminds me of Jason Maxiell. That's like my player comp for him.
That's a bad player comp for Isaiah Stewart.
And that's not someone I wanted to take at 16, especially with Tyrese Maxey on the board. And that would have been a backcourt I would love to have with Killian Hayes and Tyrese Maxey right there. That would have been beautiful.
There's honestly a couple of guys that the Pistons could have had at 16 that I would have loved to see them grab. And I'm drafting.
I was hoping for Aaron Naismith or Kira Lewis to fall to us there, but neither did.
Oh,
but
right. Yeah,
I was really happy. I would have been really happy
with
Tyrese Maxey.
Like, I would have loved Isaiah Stewart. I still don't like the pick. I give it like a C minus. It just doesn't really make sense to me because it doesn't really look like he's a guy that is going to be a focal point of this franchise or a guy we're going to build with in the future. I mean, he's going to be a defensive center, a defensive small ball center or power forward coming off the bench for the Pistons. He's got a high motor, a lot of energy, but I don't see the offensive game really developing for us in the way we need it to. I would have loved to see them go after guys like you mentioned, Tyrese Maxey at 16, or even honestly, I would have loved to see him go after RJ Hampton and his potential. There's a lot of potential with RJ Hampton there as well, and to add RJ Hampton to a draft that you already had grabbed Killian Hayes, I would have loved to see that build along with Tyrese Maxey if we would have gotten him there. So I think with what was available on the board, the Isaiah Stewart pick I didn't really love it. Yeah. But I again, he's a guy that I don't know a ton about, but I also really don't love necessarily what I've heard about him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm at like a D plus, and honestly, in a vacuum, a guy like this is a guy that it's not going to hurt you. This is a safer pick, I guess, in a vacuum. But I just thought there were some other guys on the board that it didn't really justify taking, and also where he was supposed to go. This is a guy who was supposed to go in like the back of the first round, early second round too. So it didn't make much sense to me. But so yeah, I'm at a D plus with that one. Then again, we traded back into the first round at 19 and grabbed Saddiq Bey.
This pick I love.
Yeah, out of Villanova. I love this pick. And I was texting you. I'm like, I really like Bey here. Let's hope and then they grabbed him, and that was all she wrote. Now, Bey, for all intents and purposes, based on multiple reports, was supposed to go to the Spurs at 11, but Devin Vassell dropped to them, so I don't blame them for taking Devin Vassell there. Right. Or Devin Vassell, I guess his name is pronounced. But Saddiq Bey is a guy that he can defend at all three levels. He can score at all three levels. It's just he doesn't. The only knock I have on him is like his explosiveness, his athleticism and explosiveness. He can shoot really well. I believe he shot 45% from three.
45% from three, making 2.5 per game. So it's not like a low volume. He had pretty decent volume shooting outside, with making those 2.5 per game and shooting 45%. So
exactly, he could become a lockdown defender. This is a guy who I can see sticking in the league for a long time. He's my favorite type of 3-and-D player outside the explosive. I wish he was more explosive, but he's my ideal 3-and-D player, and and especially when you consider coming out of Villanova. Villanova guys tend to not bust. So
no, Villanova's got a good track record for developing players. I again, like you mentioned, I really think he's a 3-and-D player that can be very successful with this team. He's got great length, 7-foot wingspan. He's just better than what anybody expects him to be. He's got great strength, size, length. He's got an excellent shooter, especially from outside, and that's something that we've been wanting on this Pistons team for a long time. How many players have we drafted to be 3-and-D guys that just have not panned out? So I think Saddiq Bey is another one of those guys that we want to have be our 3-and-D guy, and I think he will pan out. He's a really strong wing, and again, if he only had a little bit more athleticism, he'd almost be the perfect player. But I love the pick of bringing Saddiq Bey in. I'd easily give it an A-, B+, A- right there.
I agree. I'm at an A with Saddiq Bey. And then we had our second round pick. Did you want to go into that, or?
I mean, we can go into it.
Okay. So in the second round, we traded back in again. That was the Pistons' third trade of the night, and we drafted a gentleman by the name of
Wow.
Saban Lee.
Gentleman.
Yeah, Saban Lee out of Vanderbilt. Now, I was one of the people watching this. I was like, oh my God, we traded the second round. Please be gunning for Cassius. I would love to have Cassius Winston here.
I wanted him so bad.
But you can't really, I mean, I can't really hate on, I be honest, I didn't know who he was really before we drafted him. But from what I watched on him, from what I read on him, I can't really hate on it. I mean, he's super explosive as a point guard. He shoots really well, 48.3% from the field. He averaged 18.5 points and 4.5 assists per game. I can't really hit. It's a guy that he's obviously not going to play much. I think he's probably coming in on a two-way contract.
I was going to say probably on a two-way contract. Going to see a lot of G League time.
But the speed, the quickness.
It was a depth play it's one of those depth Hail Mary plays that, hey, maybe he develops into something great, maybe he doesn't. It is what it is. You know, it's not going to hurt you. going and grabbing him. I
just wonder if that's who they were actually gunning for when they traded in the second round. That's what I wonder.
That is I am kind of curious to see that. I don't know.
Because Troy Weaver claims that they had a first round grade on Saban Lee. I don't really see it, but
okay. Again, though, I personally would have preferred to see them go after a guy like Cassius Winston. I actually think Cassius Winston will be one of those bench guards that just plays a long time in the league with a long career that is very successful at their role, at their position. I don't think they'll ever reach.
I mean, the big word with Cassius is the injury, so like that's, that'd be the thing preventing him. As long as he can stay healthy, yeah,
right.
I can definitely see
I see a lot of potential with Cassius Winston that could have really helped this Pistons team, especially with the maturity that he has at the point guard position. That's something that I do think the Pistons are going to really be clamoring for a couple of years here, and I think Cassius Winston could have brought that. So, but again, Saban Lee is a guy that, like we mentioned, I think will have a lot of opportunity in the G League. Maybe he does develop into something, maybe he doesn't.
So overall, what are you giving Troy Weaver on the draft before we move into free agency?
The draft, I'll give it a B+. We got the guy we wanted in Killian Hayes. Sadiq Bey was a bonus, but Isaiah Stewart in that spot with what was available behind him, I think that's a big knockdown. So I go with a B+.
There's that big negative for me that stops it from being an A draft, but I still it's still the best draft that could remember recent memory for the Pistons.
It's one of the only drafts I've actually been excited about coming out of, because I wasn't really all that excited about the Luke Kennard draft, knowing that Donovan Mitchell was there and we didn't take him. Wasn't all that excited about.
One of those guys just signed a max deal.
Right. I wasn't excited about the Sekou Doumbouya draft just because there were so many unknowns there. We just, we didn't know what to expect out of that. I obviously wasn't all that excited about, I don't know. There just wasn't a lot of them. And this one I actually legitimately am excited about. I do think we got a future cornerstone player in Killian Hayes and a lot to build around here. So it does make me excited for what we have coming up. Yeah.
Moving into probably the biggest move that Troy Weaver made this offseason, he let the top maker walk. Applause.
Yay!
No, so they traded Kyrie Thomas and Tony Snell for Dwayne Dedmon. This was purely a contract thing. The Dwayne Dedmon and Kyrie and Tony Snell had about identical contracts, but Dwayne Dedmon's final year only had $1 million guaranteed. So that was purely a money move. And then they actually ended up, I believe,
we ended up using the stretch provision on them.
Yep, which is it's gonna be like a $2.3 million cap hit over the next 5 years.
For 5 or 6 years, something like that.
I think it was 5, I want to say. And this is where free agency started. Almost right the bell. Pistons first out of the gate signing Mason Plumlee.
Miles Plumlee.
Mason Plumlee or Miles Plumlee?
I thought it was Miles.
I thought it was Mason.
Hang on.
Whoever's on Denver, I get them mixed up all the time.
Hang on. Mason, sorry.
Yeah.
Mason.
They signed Mason Plumlee to a 3-year, $25 million deal. 30-year-old Mason Plumlee. This coming out of the gate, I was like, what in the hell is this?
I had so much hope for Troy Weaver. Like, I had so much hope. I was all excited, and then he made this signing, and I went, well, here we go again. There goes now, all of my hope out the window.
I will say this. It didn't look as bad after I was seeing some of the contracts that are being handing out later in free agency, like KCP for one.
That's just because the Lakers are stupid.
But just in general, like, I would have rather just kept Dwayne Dedmon and not use a stretch provision than just not sign Mason Plumlee.
Absolutely, because Dwayne Dedmon, you get him off your books essentially next year because only $1 million is guaranteed next year.
Yeah.
So
but in terms of the actual price, like, Juancho Hernan-Gomez got like $22 million for 3 years. So I think this is the going rate for mediocre centers right now.
I would have rather just not use that money at that position then. It's Mason Plumlee just moves the needle absolutely zero for me. Like this was a big negative signing in my book because the thing I really dislike about it is not the fact that we gave him almost $9 million a year. It's the fact that we have him locked up for 3 years. Like that part really just doesn't make sense because that's money that's going to be locked up that we can't use to build anymore. We can't use to bring in expiring deals or bring in bad contracts with draft capital to add to our assets there. Like it just doesn't make sense to me how Mason Plumlee can help this organization for any way over the next couple of years, outside of maybe his final year of a contract as a salary dump situation where we can bring in a draft pick for an expiring deal. That's it.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is just, I mean, obviously it's a depth move, but the only thing I can think of is it's just trying to build a certain culture, because you will start seeing some consistency with the types of guys we're bringing in here.
I don't know that it's quite a depth move, considering he's probably going to be your starting center day one.
Yeah, he probably is. Then, not too long after, Jahlil Okafor signed him 2-year vet min. Now, this one I'm a little like, the Mason Plumlee move I didn't like. Jahlil Okafor, I was just very neutral on. I was like, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's there. At least it's someone who can score down low for us. It's on a vet min. Don't really care.
Jahlil Okafor, again, another one that just doesn't move the needle at that position for me. It minimally hurts us. It doesn't really hurt us that much, but why'd you have to sign him for 2 years? Why not just give him a 1-year vet min? Like that just didn't make sense to me, and I would have rather see 1 year. Like
at least it's not an old guy you're locking up for 2.
Right, but bringing Jahlil Okafor into this organization just doesn't make sense to me. I give the Mason Plumlee signing an F, because I seriously hate that signing. The Jahlil Okafor signing, I'll just give a D- just because it doesn't hurt us really that much.
And then moving on to Josh Jackson. This is where we start getting the more upside guys. This one I actually didn't mind. So we signed Josh Jackson to a 2-year deal. We don't know the dollar amount as the recording of this podcast, but I doubt it's going to be a lot.
Probably not.
But Josh Jackson is a guy who actually kind of like Jahlil Okafor. He showed some finally showed some signs of a comeback or improvement this past season. And I'm curious to see if Josh Jackson can continue building on that in this organization. Because he was not bad with the Grizz last year. He was terrible with the Suns. And then his last season with the Grizz, it wasn't terrible. So I think this is an upside move. It's low risk, high reward.
We hope. We don't really know if it's low risk. We don't know what the money is yet, but I don't expect it to be a big contract. I do think it's going to be low risk. I actually like this signing because I think Josh Jackson's one of those guys that does still have some upside. He's still young. And he's one of those Swiss Army knife players that can play quite literally any position on the basketball floor. He showed while overall his time with the Suns was not great and not good for that matter, he did show flashes of what he was drafted to be, a potential superstar. He showed flashes of that at times with the Suns. But at the very least, he showed a Swiss Army knife-like ability. He can do it all on the floor. He can guard any position. He can do whatever you ask him to do, and he'll be there to do it.
And he shot 44% on the offensive end of the floor.
Right, so. And like you mentioned with the Grizzlies, he had a solid season last year, showed some potential, showed a resurgence, and I think this is an opportunity for Josh Jackson to take up a bigger role on a team and potentially make a name for himself and be the player he was drafted to be. So I actually like the Josh Jackson signing. It's a guy you're taking a shot with that's young, cheap, and had a lot of potential, may still have some potential, and it isn't going to hurt you.
And then finally, the last big, I mean, we did have, we had a couple smaller moves, but the last big move as of this point, the Pistons signed Jeremy Grant to a 3-year, $60 million deal. Now, Jeremy Grant was a huge part of that Denver playoff run. Really effective coming off the bench for him. First glance, I mean, I really love Jeremy Grant as a player.
I do too.
Put that right out there.
I think he's a very good player.
First glance, though, and I texted you immediately after this, I was worried that we kind of threw the back to the Brinks truck for him and tried to get him to come here. Because I'm like, there's no way he would have left Denver. Like, we had to have thrown so much money at him. Like, so much more money than he would have been getting from Denver for him to come here. Then I found out that Denver was offering him the same exact contract, apparently, which boggles my mind as to why he chose to come here, I guess, playing time. But
probably given the keys to lead a team.
Yeah. Exactly. With that being said, he's the exact type of player I love, like in terms of mindset, in terms of skill set. I really like this signing. This is probably my favorite move that Troy Weaver's done so far outside of the draft.
Now, with the Jeremy Grant signing, are the reports actually confirmed that the Nuggets were offering him that contract, or is that just speculation?
It's multiple reports, including from really high-level sources, and it was never denied from the Nuggets organization.
Okay. So. Either way, though, again, I like Jeremy Grant a lot. I still don't consider him a $20 million player. I think he's going to be probably one of, if not the best player on this roster next year, outside of maybe Blake Griffin.
I agree.
But that's not really saying much. Because, again, Troy Weaver made it a point to really tear down this roster this offseason and try to get younger and build a lot of youth and build some future assets here. But I do think Jeremy Grant's a really good player. Like you mentioned, I love the mindset. I love the explosiveness. I love the energy. that Jeremy Grant brings to the table. But again, I do think you overpaid for him a little bit. It really doesn't matter to me that the Nuggets were willing to offer him that contract. I think that's a moot point, because if the Nuggets gave him that contract, I would have thought they overpaid for him. Mm-hmm. So I think you're overpaying for a guy like Jeremy Grant, but then again, he is a good player, and I do like him, and I will like to see him in a Pistons uniform. I do hope he flourishes here and makes a good name for himself. And
I mean, it's not going to be too different than seeing him in a Denver uniform. I mean, we basically copied their uniforms.
I mean, yeah.
It is like a replica.
Yeah. But either way, I like the Jeremy Grant signing. I just think you gave him a little bit too much money. That's all. There was a bunch of other moves that the Pistons made also.
Yeah, I was going to keep going too. So like Christian Wood, we finally got more color on what was happening there. So we ended up letting him. This was the positive I take. We did re-sign Christian Wood, even though I think both of us wanted us
definitely wanted
try
to
re-sign him. Don't know what the situation was there, but the positive I take from this, and something I don't think the past regimes would have done, is we didn't let him walk for nothing. It turns out that the way we got that first round pick from the Rockets was through a sign and trade for Christian Wood. It was all part of the deal. So Christian Wood was moved to to Houston for Trevor Ariza and the number 16 overall pick. So and then the first round pick that we gave back was so heavily protected, and then it actually came out after the Christian Wood sign that it was even more heavily protected than we initially thought.
Right. It's top. It's what, lottery protected for the next 3 years, and then it's top 10 protected for the next 2 after that, and then it becomes like 3 second-round picks after that or something like that.
Yeah, let's just say I don't expect this pick to ever convey unless the Pistons actually become really good.
I actually think it'll convey once it's top 10 protected. I don't necessarily know about lottery protected over the next few years, but I do think top 10 protected it'll convey it.
Let's say this: we hope it'll convey when it's top 10 protected.
Right. And so let me kind of preface things by saying this,
because that won't be good.
Right.
If we're still in the top 10.
Right. Let me preface things by saying this: Troy Weaver very clearly is doing things his way, and very clearly building this roster. And I'm kind of curious to get your thought process on this, or thoughts on this as well, because my thoughts on this are as such. You know, this is a guy who came into an organization who very clearly has been given the keys and carte blanche to do whatever the hell he wants with this roster. And he is doing it his way and not caring about what the future for this franchise is going to be. He says, I don't care what happens 4 or 5 years down the line if this doesn't work, because, well, I won't be here if this doesn't work. And frankly, I'm okay with that mindset at this point, because I'm tired of seeing this team lose. I want to see this team back in relevant in terms of relevance, and I want to see them back competing. So if he's going to come in here and make drastic changes and you know, look 4 or 5 years down the line and say it doesn't matter what we do then, because frankly I won't be here to have to worry about it, I'm okay with that. And if we're competing at that time, that's a solid trade-off in my opinion. So yeah. I get what he's doing, and I understand it, and he's not really giving a big opportunity to the guy in the future, to the guy that may follow him if things don't work out, but that's okay in my mind at this point. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, is it okay for a GM to march in here day one, completely blow things up, build it his way, and put the future of this organization at risk just because he won't be around to see it?
So I'm actually viewing it a little differently here. I don't really see him as putting the future of the organization at risk through these moves. Because if you look, the next, like 2021, okay, it's going to be a solid free agency. 2022 is when you're going to have a lot of big names in free agency. And you're going to have everyone outside of all the contracts off your books, outside of Grant and Plumlee. And they're going to be expiring deals at that time. They're going to be 1 year left, expiring deals that are movable. So I do think that he's still doing it to a point where you are going to be in play for some high-level free agents at that time. And I also don't think that our roster is quite yet good enough to put us out of play for a high pick in the 2021 draft, which is what I'm really gunning for here.
Well, I'm more referring to, I think he's going to get at least 3 years to right this ship and get this team competing no matter what. Even if they're bottom barrel.
I agree with that.
I think he's going to get at least 3 years. But beyond those 3 years, if they aren't successful beyond that, that's where you start to see that protection starts to be a little bit shakier. Because if 4 years down the road, the Pistons are still picking at 12, 13, we clearly were not successful. We're clearly still a bad basketball team. And Troy Weaver's probably gone at that point, and we lose that first round pick at that point also.
But at the same time, how much I've never seen a first round pick protected more than the one we just traded away.
That's it's not that uncommon to see a pick protected like that.
That's what I'm saying. Like
it's not that uncommon is my point. Like it happens all the time to see first round picks protected for several years. We've seen it before. We'll see it again. We will, it happens. That's just what it is. But again, if the Pistons are drafting in that 12, 13, 14, 15 range in 3 years, he wasn't successful. He won't be around probably beyond that because he'll probably get shown papers to go walk. And then we'll be back right where we started, but without a first-round pick at that point. Yeah. So he is kind of more... He's betting on himself. He is kind of mortgaging the future, which is what you mentioned the money in free agency that will be available. What we get with that money is another thing that is going to kind of make me really focus in on what his tenure's been here, because I do think he's going to spend a lot of that money in the next coming years. But at the same time, it's also going to be tough for him because it's never been easy for a GM to bring free agent talent to the Detroit Pistons. Never. And it never will be. It's just the fact of the matter in the NBA. This isn't a destination organization for players in free agency to come play. So how he's able to creatively use that money is where I think is where he needs to shine. So, if he's not able, and if he just throws money at the guys that are your third and fourth options because we couldn't get our top two, well, again, then we're right back where we started. He will have mortgaged the future at that point even further by adding long contracts on the books for guys who really aren't going to lead this team to success. And again, he will be right back where we started, and he won't be around to see it, and we'll have mortgaged the future. So I see what he's setting up for, and I like that he's betting on himself, and I like that he's being given the keys and carte blanche to do it. I am just looking at it saying that this is a guy who's... I'm not really saying this is bad. I'm just saying this is a guy who was coming in saying, I don't give a shit what 4 or 5 years looks down the line if we aren't successful in 3 years or 4 years. I don't care because I won't be around to see it. And this definitely
seems like a 3-year plan for right now.
Right.
Just judging by what the contract, or you could say like a 4-year plan, judging by what the contracts are and stuff. I think there's something he's trying to time it with in terms of probably 2022 free agency is what I'm looking at, maybe 2023. But yeah, I do think that he's not viewing this as like a 7-year. He came in and said he wasn't even trying to rebuild. But I don't think he's viewing this as like a 6-7 year rebuild.
I don't think there's any question he's rebuilt.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. But I don't think he's viewing this as like a 5, 6, 7 year process. I think he is viewing this as like, all right, we're going to get this done in the next 3 years, 4 years.
Right. But as a level-headed and a realistic Pistons fan, knowing that mortgaging your future isn't necessarily the best way to do things, are you okay with Troy Weaver coming in here and essentially potentially mortgaging the future of this franchise for his 3 years or 4 years?
Well, again, I don't see where the future is mortgaged at this point. That's where the disconnect is. So like I don't the first round pick that we trade, I don't view that as mortgaging our future because
I do because
that's about as many protections as you can put on a first round pick.
Thing is though is I do because if we're still picking in that 12-13 range 3 years down the road, when that pick will end up conveying at that point, he has not succeeded and the future is mortgaged and we are right back where we started. That's mortgaging your future. Not having a first round pick when you're a bottom 15 team in the league that meant your future was mortgaged years prior, that you don't have a way to turn things around. You don't have a way to build for your future because if this 3-4 year plan doesn't work in 3-4 years, well, it's time to rebuild. And you can't start your rebuild because you don't have a first round pick. So if I'm looking at it in that sense, like I don't want a guy to come in. If I'm looking at it where I don't want a GM to mortgage the future of a franchise, I don't want him trading first round picks ever. Like you trade first round picks when you are gunning for a championship.
I view it as almost like a pick swap because you trade a first for a first. Like you trade a first and got a first.
Yeah.
So,
but
and then the first you traded,
this year.
you got a first this year. But then, like, again, you have 4 straight years of the pick not conveying unless you're outside of the top 16. It's projected 1 through 16 the first 4 years, 1 through 10 in the next 2, and then top 9 in year 7.
Right, which we expect it to convey when it's top 10 protected. But again, if they are not outside, like if they are not near the top,
then you just failed. That's what I'm saying. Then you just failed as a GM.
And
I don't think it's mortgaging the future. That's just
yes, it is mortgaging the future because you gave up a first round pick when you need to rebuild at that point if it failed. Like it's. I'm not always a fan of a GM coming in and giving up a first round pick when we're in the middle of a rebuild. I don't care how far down the road that first round pick is because we have no track record of success here. Like there is 0 track record of success, so we may be in the same spot, further down the road. So that's my point. Is with no track record of success, we're not competing for a championship. You trade first round picks when you're competing for a championship to get you that guy to put you over the edge. You don't really want to do that when you're trying to rebuild your roster.
It's just so hard to project where the team's. It's just so hard to project where the team's going to be 5 years out.
Right,
you know what I'm
and that's
saying?
my
you don't
point.
know.
And that's my point. Because there's no track record of success, there's no way to believe that this team will be anything good in the next few years. To give up a first-round pick when we may be looking at staring the face of another rebuild in the future because we don't know what this team will end up being, that's a little bit worrisome looking at the future because, again, we won't have a first-round pick to start a new rebuild and build around a guy. Like, I get what he's doing. I understand it, and honestly, with Troy Weaver, I trust him. I like the idea. It's just a little bit unconventional, a little bit uncomfortable because of that. Like, I guess I'm a little bit of a guarded Pistons fan, having watched bad basketball and lack of success for the better half of 15 years now. Like, it's or more than the better half of 15 years. But like I mentioned, I don't like seeing GMs come in to a rebuild situation and trading future assets away to get assets now to start your rebuild. Like, again, you have to show me that you're going to be here longer than that. Long enough to have to reap the repercussions from that. You have to show me that you're here long enough to build something. Like that's like I don't like mortgaging my future, giving up future assets to try to build things now. I get what he did, and I'm not against it. I guess let me try to explain. I'm not against it. Like I like what Troy Weaver's doing. I like the moves he's made. I think, like you mentioned, he did protect that pick as much as he could. So I like the path he's going in, and I like the aggressiveness. But again, there is a little bit of worry in me that if this doesn't pan out in 4 years, well, we may be screwed for not only 4 years, but 4, 5, 6, and 7 years, is my point. Does that make sense?
You said 4, 5, 6, and 7. Like it's 1 year.
Yes, but again, you start your rebuild with the 1 year. If you're not able to start your rebuild, that one pick could set you back a couple of years. We've seen that before. You know that's true.
We'll see. I mean, I don't know. Because like when I think mortgage in the future, I think like what Brooklyn did to bring Paul Pierce KG in, or what the Lakers did to bring AD in. Like that's what I think when I think mortgage in the future. But
yes, that's to an extreme though. Just because you're mortgaging your future, it doesn't have to automatically be at that level. You can still mortgage it just a little bit and hurt yourself in the future. Because again, if we're not good in 4 years, we're not going to be good for 4, 5, and 6 probably.
So let's look really hot. Let's close this out looking high level though, over everything that Troy Weaver's done so far in this last week or so. When I was looking, like when you look at every signing in the vacuum or every draft pick, like there was a lot, I'll admit, like to at least on my end, there was a lot of, how does he fit? Where does he go? Wait, how does this play in? But now that we're starting, and I don't even think we're done, but now that we're starting to seeing a little bit of the bigger picture, it's starting to make a little more sense because you're looking at the guys that the Pistons brought in, and these are guys that, and I'm talking about our draft picks. I'm talking about Jeremy Grant, Mason Plumlee. These are guys that are like high motor, high work ethic, hard-nosed defensive players. Like what I'm seeing is I'm starting to see the buds of a culture finally. And that's why I'm a little more positive on what Troy Weaver's done so far than anything else is because for once, the first time since the going to work crew, I'm starting to see, as long as it pans, like as long as what I'm expecting from these players pans out, I'm starting to see a little bit of a culture in terms of types of players we're bringing in. So that's why I'm positive on what Troy Weaver's done so far.
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of reason to be positive about what Troy Weaver's done, and I know I just spent the last probably 10 minutes talking about reasons to not really like it, but Again, I will say I love what he's done so far. I did not believe in this roster last year, and I haven't believed in it in a while. And for him to come in and say, and basically align with what I believe and say, all right, we need to start from scratch and be aggressive in doing so. I like that. It's really nice and refreshing to see a GM come into this city, into this Pistons organization in particular, and be aggressive. But not only just be aggressive by just throwing money at random people like what we've seen in the past with a couple of guys, but he calculated a lot of what he did. There's a couple of question marks like the Mason Plumlee, like Jao Okafor, and there's a couple question marks there, but in terms of the Okafor one, it doesn't really hurt us. In terms of the Mason Plumlee signing it, when we expect this team to compete, he probably won't be around because there's a good chance we trade him in 2 years when his deal is expiring, or we just let it go off the books.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to end up hurting us that long term. So I like the aggressiveness and I like what he's doing there. And I do believe that for the first time in a long time, we see an actual vision in mind to build a roster and build a culture, like you mentioned. And that's comforting and something that I really like to see as well. So I give Troy Weaver so far an A for what he's done this offseason.
I agree.
There's a couple of question marks in there, obviously, but I love what he's doing. And even though I mentioned it scares me a little bit to throw a little bit of mortgaging into the future, I still love what he's doing because I really want to see this basketball team start winning sooner rather than later. So
this has been the most exciting offseason since we signed Ben Gordon and Charlie V. Oh, wait, shit. No, I should have said that.
I mean, it really is the most exciting offseason since then.
All right, my final question before we close off, because we are running long here. Derrick Rose, Blake Griffin, are they on the team day one?
Day one, yes. After the trade deadline, probably not.
Okay.
I don't think that either of those two guys fit what Troy Weaver wants to do here. Derrick Rose does a little bit more than Blake Griffin, but I don't think Blake Griffin does.
I've heard a lot of people saying they want us to still keep Derrick Rose around because he can be a mentor to Killian Hayes. But again, he's said repeatedly, he's repeatedly said he's not interested in mentoring younger guys. He's
right.
Said that.
I don't understand why
apparently Killian Hayes is another guy that he idolizes as Derrick Rose, but that's beyond.
Wonderful. I just don't understand why people think Derrick Rose is this ultimate mentor for these young guards. Like, he doesn't want to be a mentor.
Yeah. But what I do really love is like when you have a guy like Jeremy Grant and then you bring a guy in like Sadiq Bey, that's a guy that can be a really good influence on Sadiq Bey.
Absolutely. That's a good pairing right there that I think will be extremely beneficial to Sadiq Bey and his game coming into this league. So, but a lot of optimism and positives to look at with this Pistons team. I like that they're throwing all the chips on the table here and saying, hey, we're going to build a winner within 3 or 4 years, or we're going to build a loser for a long time. And I'm okay with that because it's time to be aggressive and build a winner in this city and build a winner with this organization. And I'm ready for that. I want it now. And that's what Troy Weaver's got a vision to do. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's the first time I felt like GM has a direction or a plan.
Right. Hell, it's the first time I felt like we've had a GM in a couple of years. Oh, wait.
Oh, man.
Anyways, though, anything else to add?
That's it. That was a lot today.
It was,
we could just done a whole show on the Pistons.
We easily
could. Hour.
We could talk about this for another 40 minutes, at least.
We just scratched it. So we didn't even get into some of the smaller deals, some of the nitty-gritty of the deals. We didn't get any of that.
I mean, hell, we traded Tony Bradley away for Zaire Smith right before we started recording this.
Yep. Which I do like. Zaire Smith, again, a rough start to his career, but he was a guy I liked in the draft.
Another young player with potential.
Yep, exactly.
I like it.
One less center on the roster.
This is what I like about, seriously. This is what I like about what Troy Weaver's doing. Bringing guys in like Jeremy Grant, primarily Josh Jackson, Jao Okafor, Zaire Smith, guys like that, Zanan Musa. They're guys who, albeit haven't had the most stellar starts of their careers. However, they were guys that had and probably still have a ton of potential coming into this league. And these are the years where they will be given, one, the opportunity, and two, the time to prove themselves.
You throw enough darts on the board, one of them's bound to stick.
Right. This is essentially adding other draft picks from the previous years of fucked up draft picks for the Pistons. Anyways, though, Andrew, thank you for joining me. Thank you guys for listening, and we hope you guys have a very happy and safe Thanksgiving, whatever you guys choose to do. Andrew, real quickly, what are your Thanksgiving plans this week?
0.
I like it. I honestly same.
Nothing.
We are not doing anything either.
With the rents. That's where I'll be.
My girlfriend and I, we decided that we are not going to be doing any kind of family Thanksgiving with either side of the family. We are going to be staying home. And we got a couple of turkey legs because we like dark meat, not light meat. We got a couple of turkey legs, and we're making a few side dishes, and we're just gonna have our own Thanksgiving dinner with us and our dogs. So it'll be nice.
I'm not even getting turkey because I don't feel like having leftover turkey for 2 weeks straight.
See, that's one of my favorite parts about Thanksgiving that I honestly think I will be missing this year because I love the day after. Turkey.
I love the day after leftovers because, like in our family, what we used to always do is we get together the day after and have like a second Thanksgiving, and like the day after leftovers are always just as good. But like I couldn't have leftovers for like because you're gonna be eating if you got a whole turkey for just like 3 or 4 people, you're gonna be eating turkey for at least a week straight.
See, that's why we only got the legs because we knew that like. It's only just the two of us, so like
I might just get a roasted chicken and just pretend it's turkey.
Go with the audible that a lot of people go with the ham. A lot of people go ham for Thanksgiving instead of turkey.
I'm just trying to find one that's not too big. That's what I've been trying to find.
Turkey straight up is an overrated main dish. Like it's a very dry bird that you have to inject with flavor because it doesn't really have any itself. I will say though, one of my favorite things about leftovers from Thanksgiving that I will miss this year is not being able to make turkey sandwiches for leftovers because real turkey sandwiches just are way better than that cold cut turkey. So like the real turkey sandwiches that I can bring to work for lunches and stuff like that or just have as a snack on the weekend, like that I'll miss this year. So, but anyways, though, we do hope you guys have a happy and safe Thanksgiving. We'll see what the Lions do this week, coming off of a short week after an abysmal loss. Let's hope for better times ahead for all of our teams in this city. A couple of teams look like they have positive futures between the Wings and the Pistons, and I like that. So, but
finally, we have a little bit of positivity.
We have actual GMs piloting the ships here, so captaining the ships, I should say. So there's stuff to look forward to. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Andrew, for joining me. Thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast, as always. Follow us on Twitter, @RealFanReport. Check out our weekly fantasy podcast as well, The Fanalists. For any fantasy advice, we do dive into a lot of DFS as well, so that's something to look at. And Taysom Hill should not be listed as a tight end in DFS ever. But thank you guys again. This has been The Fan Reporters. Bye, fans.
For fans.
We'll catch you guys next week. Peace out.
See you.